folks. Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Egberto Will is your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Today we have, of course, the one and only Thom Hartmann, who's going to start up the show. But before we get busy, a few things to talk about. How you doing, Brittany, mi preciosa, cómo estás? We also have Pauline Barraza, Bob Helmick. How you doing, Bob? Thank you for being here as well. Chris Byer, thank you for being here. We're going to have a great show for you today. Did a great interview with Thom yesterday. By the way, we also have in the house Patrick Magner from Houston, Texas. This says meow. Deigel, Gene Deigel from Alvin, Texas. I got that right. And Carl Cox is in from where's Carl Springs? I know he's from Georgia. I got to remember the place in Georgia. Happens all the time. John Cotter says, "Howdy, Egberto. Great had meeting last night with Joe Rudd. Oh God. Oh, I couldn't have made it anyway. I was about, wow, I should have gone. How's John doing? I need to give John a call. He's going to be our railroad commissioner, and that's going to be great. That we have he's a mechanical engineer like me. John. That's why we have fun when we sit down and start talking the nerdy stuff. Anyway, LBW La Profesora is in the house. How you doing, LBW? Are you ready for? Let me see. Have your classes begun yet, or are you just kind of fixing up your class like Ashley is? See, her class is beautiful. She set up her science class, and those kids are going to think they're in some sort of Riverdale, Georgia. Thank you, Carl. They're going to think that they're in some sort of a, I don't know, nice. She puts all kind of lights in there. It's a trip. She went all out to the room today, or this season. Margaret, how you doing? Welcome to Politics Done Right. Sam as well. Mark, welcome as well. Anyway, we're gonna have Thom Hartmann, but before we go to Thom Hartmann, I want to tell you a few funny things. Right? The story is that Donald Trump is a coward. I mean, we always knew that, right? But when you see one of the most cowardly acts that he did, uh, I mean, people may say, "Oh, well, it was the Secret Service who did that." Nah, 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 nah. Let's make it clear. Let me go ahead and pull that story up. I think I got it. I think I got the story that I want to kind of just tease you a little bit with, and it goes like this. Contradicting public statement, Trump took secret flight from Turkey amid Iranian threat. An Iranian assassination threat against President Donald Trump prompted an extraordinary operation last month in which he flew secretly from Turkey on an alternate military aircraft while the White House aide said he was aboard Air Force One, the Washington Post learned. The clandestine mission, which has not been reported previously, has carried out unbeknownst to journalists and some White House staff members who believed they were on the same plane with the president. According to the material reviewed by the Post, the U.S. official familiar with the operation and another person with knowledge of the president's travel. These people spoke on condition of anonymity. I'm going to have a comment about that in a minute. Uh, the administration has claimed that Trump departed Turkey on July 8th on the former Air Force One. Trump announced on social media that he would use the former Air Force One rather than the plane that took him there, a newer Boeing 747-8 gifted to the United States by Qatar. In other words, he begged them for that. Anyway, in Ankara, Trump boarded the old Air Force One jumbo jet in view of television cameras. He was secretly, check this out, he was secretly shuttled minutes later to a smaller plane, an Air Force C-32A, via an airport catering truck. The President of the United States was thrown in a catering truck typically used to load meals and other supplies pre-flight, according to the U.S. official and corroborated materials. That made Air Force One a decoy with media and some White House staff aboard. Listen to what the coward did. Oh, Carter says the C-32 is a 757. Look at what the coward did. His whole entourage, the press, and all of these guys were left on the airplane, the Air Force One. They're left on Air Force One as Donald Trump jumped on a decoy plane. How cowardly. So the life of those other people don't matter, right? The life those people don't matter. LBW, so you're in meetings and your kids start on the 17th. I think Ashley's kids start on the 12th. It is sad. I mean, the coward left in a little truck to a C-75. I mean C-30, what C-32, and left the journalist and his staff on the plane. So if Iran was going to shoot a missile at it, their lives have no value. Let's just move the coward. Let's move the coward. Trump had been in Ankara for a NATO summit with world leaders. The operation occurred a night after U.S. forces renewed military strikes on Iran and Trump's direction following a breakdown of negotiations. The maneuver meant that Trump's actual location was concealed from the American public and many senior U.S. officials for hours. Weeks later, it remains clear how widely the administration has disclosed the operation. Wow. The Post provided the White House with the details from its reporting, along with the list of questions. In response, White House Communication Director Stephen Chung issued a statement defending the jet gifted by Qatar. The new Air Force One is a state of the art aircraft that has been fitted with a high level security protocol that ensures the safety of the president and staff, Chung's statement said. As the president has said recently, there are many enemies of the United of America who have their sights on him, and we use every tool at our disposal to address that. So you know they may attack the president plane, and you don't tell the reporters, you don't tell the journalists, you don't tell the staff. So as they blow up, you get saved. Wow. That is, if that doesn't make him look like a coward and weak, I don't know what does. I do not know what does if it doesn't show that this man is a coward, a cheat, and everything else. They did not have enough time to outfit the 747 8 bribery jet with full suite of defensive. And you know what? It's kind of silly to do that from an engineering standpoint. You know, if you're building a 747 for Air Force One, I imagine, and I don't know this for a fact, John, but from an engineering standpoint, if you're going to build a 747 for the White House, one of the reasons it take years is you're likely not going to use the same chassis that you're going to use for a standard 747. Let me give a reason why. On these, and this is just from an engineering assumption, where things are bolted to the skin, or not to the skin, but to the frame, those are the stress points where fractures likely occur the most. So if you have a plane that's already built out and you're going to start drilling inside of the fuselage so that you can position equipment, unless you're using standardized things that are already connected to uh, pre-located joints in the plane, what you've done is made that plane, from a metallurgical point of view, more susceptible to cracks, which actually can bring a plane down eventually. So I find it hard to believe that they would retrofit things like the anti-missile defense that the plane has. Let's see. Actually, the two 747 that have been delayed for years, built in San Antonio, were actually built for a Russian airline, but never delivered. There you go. Now think about this, guys. Think about this. Do you really think a Qatar airplane that doesn't have necessarily all the information as far as what maintenance it had gone through, what cracks may have been found, etc., is not going to have to go through a full pull down and a rebuild, and might as well get a new plane at that point? But anyhow, Anyhow, this is the president. This is our president. They're going to spend $1 billion of our money to rebuild the plane. I better get the Thom Hartmann show going. So let me go ahead and pull Thom Hartmann up. And by the way, if you can't stay to watch it today, folks, I'm going to be playing it tomorrow morning as well for the people on air, which Samuel cast here. But here is Thom Hartmann. I hope you enjoyed. I love the brother. Let's go ahead and get busy. Well, folks, welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right on Egberto Off the Record. Today, as usual, we have a very special guest. Joining us today is the legendary progressive radio host and best-selling author and fearless truth teller, Thom Hartmann. We'll discuss the state of American politics, the pivotal 2026 midterms, and his urgent new book, Who Killed the American Dream? Thom, welcome to the program. How you doing today, my dear brother?
Thank you, Egberto. It's great to see you.
Well, who killed the American Dream? Well, all the time, man, all the time. Who killed the American dream?
The Supreme Court. Short answer.
The short answer is the Supreme Court. Anyway, Thom, look, it's an honor to have you here. Like I tell you, you are progressive media. You are the one who have carried this mantra for a very long time, and I know our audience is going to appreciate that. We're speaking to the man today. How are you doing today, and how are you been?
Fine. Yeah. Still alive, still kicking.
Well, that's the name of the game, right? You're still doing your show. You're still doing everything. Anyway, folks, tell me about. Let's start out before we get into the politics. Let's start about a little bit about this new book that you've written. This is another book in the series of books that you've done.
Yeah, this is a standalone book. It's not part of the Hidden History series, but it's back in 2002. I was digging around a law library in Vermont, the Supreme Court Law Library, and got the original 1888 printed edition of the Supreme Court proceedings from 1886. Because I wanted to write I was working on a book called Unequal Protection about the 14th Amendment. And according to everything I'd read at that point, in 1886, the Supreme Court said that the 14th Amendment, which says that all persons are entitled to equal rights under the law, due process, equal protection under the law, I think was the phrase, that included corporations, that persons designation included corporations. So I wanted to read the decision. And so the law librarian, a guy named Paul Donovan, helped me find it. He was a librarian and a lawyer, I think. And I read the entire decision, and nowhere did it say that corporations are persons. And I went back to Paul and I said, I'm not seeing this here. And he was like, oh, that's weird. And he read it and he was like, I don't see it either. And so he said, let's flip back to the preceding page. This is like a 150-year-old book. So we go to the page that precedes it, and there's this thing called a headnote, which is a summary written by the clerk of the court, which has absolutely no legal standing or legal power whatsoever. It's there basically for law students and, reporters and anybody who's looking for a good summary of the case. And I mean, these date back to John Marshall. And in that headnote, it says the court is of the opinion that the 14th Amendment applies to corporations as persons, and they're entitled to equal protection under the law. I'm paraphrasing, but it said essentially that. And I'm like, whoa, we've based 150 years of law on this headnote, and it has no legal standing. And he's like, I'm just a librarian here. So I went down the street to a friend of mine who was a lawyer, and Jim Ritvo, and I said, what does this say to you? And I paid my 50 cents and got copies of the whole decision, and took it down to Jim. And he read it, and he's going, oh yeah. He said, you found one of these mistakes that happens every now and then throughout history. So I started digging into this, and I discovered two things. One, I wasn't the first person to discover this. Guy named Jay Graham had back in 1954, and he wrote a book about it, but I don't think it sold more than 100 copies. It was kind of a minor thing. And in fact, when my book came out on equal protection in 2002, the first talk I gave was at the Lewis and Clark Law Library here in Portland. And there were about 300 people in the room, and I said, and they were all either lawyers or law students or professors of law. And I said, please raise your hand if you know that in 1886, the Supreme Court ruled that corporations are person, and that became the foundation for Citizens United and everything else, and essentially the corporate takeover of America. And everybody raised their hand. I mean, that was the state of knowledge in 2002, even though Jay Graham had discovered this, and he wasn't the only one. There were a few others.
Are you telling me that Thom Hartmann, the progressive radio host, found out something that lawyers throughout America just let slide?
Yeah, yeah. And I published a book called Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became Persons, in 2002. But it was a real wonky book. It was a book that was written for lawyers as much as for anybody else. And in the years since then, in the 24 years since then, now, in part because of my book, and also there are a few other people who wrote similar books around the same time. This is when Move to Amend was starting to take off. And I was really I knew those guys. I thought they were really great.
Well, I was a part of the executive committee. In fact, we made I don't know if you realize it, I was an executive producer of the Legalized Democracy, and you appeared on it.
Yeah. And that was because I had written that book.
Yeah.
Because I kind of had this reputation as the guy who was, outing the Supreme Court. So anyhow, I dug into it, and I found that it was actually, and this was in that 2002 book, that it was actually a conspiracy by the clerk of the court, a guy named John Chandler Bancroft Davis, who was a wealthy former railroad executive, CEO, in fact, whose father was the governor of Massachusetts. He was a very powerful man. And back then, the clerk of the court actually had more power than any of the individual justices. He was permanently in D.C. They were only there 2 or 3 months out of the year. And the justice from California, Stephen J. Fields, each circuit sent a justice basically back then. And Stephen Field had kicked 7 of these cases, and the railroads were bribing Field. And they had told him, Stanford, the railroad billionaire who endowed the university, basically told Field that if he would get this into law, that corporations were persons, then he would sponsor him for president in the election of 1888 or 92 or whatever the year was. And we actually went back to I went down to the Stephen J. Field Library and the collection in the National Archives, and found this correspondence that nobody had looked at since maybe 1900, 1890. I mean, it was just covered with dust. It was just obvious that nobody had even looked at it. So I wrote all that up, but like I said, it didn't go very far other than to lawyers. And now if you ask, well, actually, I asked DuckDuckGo the other day, did the Supreme Court say that corporations are persons in 1886? And it said, yes, it did. Then I asked ChatGPT, and it said, no, it didn't. And it was a head
so
note.
ChatGPT got it right.
It basically quoted me back to me. And so anyhow, I've been sitting on this for 23 years and wanting to rewrite this book so that the average person would find it interesting and readable, and so so Louise and I sat down, we took the original book apart, put it back together again, and just wrote this from scratch. And it's written like a murder mystery. Who got killed? The American dream, the middle class. Who was the killer? Who was the trigger man? Well, the trigger man was Stephen J. Field. Who was the guy who hired the trigger man? Leland Sanford and John Chandler Bancroft Davis. And what do we do about it? What can we do about it now?
I want to back up. I want to back up as far as your journalism is concerned, because I've known you for a long time, and I don't think you have ever told me that you were the genesis of a whole lot of.
Oh, I'll show you the book. It's
okay.
These are all the books I've written, and it's on here someplace. I know. Come on, it's green. Oh, here's one.
There it is.
It's blue. Yeah. That's the book from 2002.
Wow. For all these years that I've known you, but you see, you write so many damn books, man. It's kind of like hard. It's hard to keep up, But I didn't, this a learning experience for me as well, because like I said, we had you with David Cobb and all the others when we did that thing, the Legalized Democracy, et cetera. That made a huge difference. In fact, you also came when we had the snowstorm at the coffee party. And I don't know if you remember that in
in New York.
DC.
Oh yeah,
In DC, it
and I
was
got in a
DC as
fight with
well.
Larry Lessig. Remember?
Oh yes, you're a bad person, Thom, because
He was like,
Lessig.
he was like, "This is the law," and I'm like, "We can change it."
Yeah, wow, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
He was very
And
pissed at me.
yeah, well, he was very pissed at a lot of folks because he had this method that he wanted to. Well, anyway, that's
Yeah,
another
yeah, it
story.
had to be done
Anyway,
his. Yeah,
yeah, it
I
had
mean,
to
he's
be
a
his
good
way.
guy. I've got
Yeah.
no shade on Larry Lessig. I have great respect for him.
Oh,
It was just one of
absolutely.
those little kind of quirky things that I said something he didn't like the way I said it, and we got into
Well, he
a
didn't like the article I wrote on the common dreams about, I think it was about, because he wanted to do it. So, and I wrote this article on the common dreams, and I did it under the name of Move to Amend, and he didn't quite like it. But anyhow, on another topic, here's the thing, Thom. You point out that corporations are guilty of us losing our democracy, and it seems like it's not. If you remember that documentary we made, it was how we used the Supreme Court to acknowledge more of our rights as time went on, and it seems like the reverse is starting to occur now, and not only in laws governing the corporations, but in laws being passed, not laws being passed, but decisions that give the executive more power, which seems to be unconstitutional in my opinion.
yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with your opinion. I mean, the it's fascinating. You go back and read the letters, particularly between Jefferson and Adams, but also, a number of the other founders. John Jay got in on this, Benjamin Rush and others. This whole idea. There was this guy Montesquieu, this French count,
Mhm.
who came up with this idea in the 1740s, I think it was. I'm trying to remember the title of the book he wrote. Anyway, I can't remember. But his idea was that every government should be broken into three parts, and each part should have veto power over, the other two, or each of the two should have veto power over one or both.
Mhm.
And the point being to distribute power, that whenever power was concentrated, that was the beginning of the end for a republic. And he cited all these, examples and things, and they're all talking about Montesquieu. Everybody loved Montesquieu. And of course, he wasn't the only one saying this. The Iroquois had a very similar system, internally as well, which the founders were very familiar with, because these were their next door neighbors,
Mhm.
and some of whom they, at least Adams and Jefferson had spent a lot of time hanging out with, and so. I would argue that if the founders were to look at these decisions handing more and more power to Trump, they would be vomiting. They would be horrified. It is so antithetical to the Constitution, to the plain language of the Constitution. Much less, read the Federalist Papers.
Mhm.
The discussions between between Madison and Hamilton, and occasionally John Jay, about the power of the executive and et cetera. I mean, you're absolutely right.
But let's go into where you think we're heading, and I don't want to get into the politics yet. I want to get into the Supreme Court. It seems to me like unless we're stuck in this cycle for a long time, unless we do something like expanding the Supreme Court, and I don't see any way around it unless you have some other opinion.
Yeah, that's going to be, well, to do what? Are you talking about to reverse Citizens
To
United?
revert, not only citizens, but a lot more McCutcheon, Citizens United.
Oh yeah, well,
Quite a
it's
few.
all fruit of the poisonous tree of
Right.
uh, you know Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad, 1886. Um, the easy way to do it, and I realize it's not easy, but is to pass a constitutional amendment. And people say, "Oh, we've got 27 constitutional amendments, and they takes forever, and average time is quack quack quack." Well, I remember when the Vietnam War was raging, and there was a broad consensus across America that 18-year-olds should be able to vote.
Mhm.
And from the time that amendment was proposed in Congress until until the 34th or whatever, I believe it was 34th state ratified it and it became law, was 4 months. I mean, it is
Oh, really?
possible. Yeah, when you've
Okay.
got a broad when you got a broad consensus, when you got an issue that's really hot that people are very much in favor of, same thing with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. They took about a year. Basically most of the time was spent writing them. It's not, yes, there are some amendments. I mean, the Equal Rights Amendment was first introduced over 100 years ago, and it still doesn't exist. So, there it can be a challenge. I mean, you've got to have 2/3 of the House and Senate and 3/4 of the states. That's big. But that's the ultimate thing that, would solve the problem once and for all, is to simply bury it in the Constitution. Short of that, the goal is to get the Supreme Court to reverse itself. And you're right; it's going to take a compositional change in the court. And this is a project, a 60-year project by the billionaires.
A successful one at that. Yeah.
Yeah, tremendously, between the Heritage Foundation and the what's his name? The guy who got a $1.4 billion.
Oh yeah, I know who you mean. Yeah, the billionaire. Yeah.
Yeah, Leonard Leo's project.
Leonard Leo. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Franklin Roosevelt, I wrote about this. There's a whole chapter about this in my book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court, that I thought was absolutely fascinating when I went back and really did a deep dive into the history. In 1930, Roosevelt was president. His first term was 32 to 36, right? That's a 4-year term. And in the election of 36, when he was running for re-election, the Supreme Court had knocked down a number of his New Deal programs. They had declared unemployment insurance unconstitutional. They declared a bunch of things that he tried to do unconstitutional. And the one that he had just passed in 35 that was teed up for a court hearing in late 36 or early 37 was Social Security. And the consensus was that they were going to strike down Social Security as being unconstitutional. And so FDR in 36 started talking about packing the court. His plan was to say that, and at that time of the I believe it was 9 members of the court, at that time, a majority of them, I think it was 5 of them, were over 70. And so what he was saying, fact check my numbers, but it's in that neighborhood. And so what he said was basically, we're going to put an age limit, a retirement age. And because the Constitution says that once you're appointed to the Supreme Court, you have an appointment to the federal bench for life. It doesn't say the Supreme Court for life.
Oh.
There's 2 ways to do this. One would be and this is how people are talking right now about the term limits. One would be to move them after a certain age back into one of the district courts or the appeals courts. The other alternative, which is what FDR was proposing, was that all of those judges over 70 together would become one. They would have one vote collectively, and they would all be called justices emeritus. In other words, kind of retired justices, but they would all still participate, but collectively they would only have one vote. And so he would add 3 or 4 or 5 new members to the court, depending on how many people were over 70. And there was actually a very good chance that this could have passed. Because it just would have required Congress making it law. It doesn't, Article 3, Section 2.
It still follows the Constitution, yeah.
Right. Yeah, it says that Congress can regulate the court. I mean, and always has. And even determine what it can and can't rule on. So that was the plan. And he went into that election and, talking about it. And there was all this blowback and all this Sturm und Drang. And then Francis Perkins, who was his labor secretary, who was really the architect of the New Deal, got to know the wife of Justice Roberts, and oddly enough, and his name was Owen Roberts, as I recall, and basically convinced her to convince her husband to change his vote. And so the 5-4 flipped. And that was referred to in the newspapers as the switch in time that saved 9. Switch in position.
Yeah, right.
And at that point, and this was just months after the election, FDR just abandoned his effort because he no longer needed to, because now he had 5 votes on the court. Everything was going through. And after Owen Roberts changed, then there was another guy who changed as well. And ultimately a third guy did change his vote. And then, by the time FDR had finished his 12-year term, he had replaced, or not all 12 years, he died in office, but his third term, he had replaced every single justice on the court. He basically outlived him. So Anyhow, so the idea is that if we can change the composition of the court, I think that might not be as difficult as people think.
Well, it would be nice because I think the country is in trouble, and let's switch to that. In fact, because sort of at 15 minutes in so far. So let me ask you this: what do you think? How do you think we get out of this? What do you think happens in November? I saw you on Palace doing a few things on that, and it kind of concerns me.
Yeah. Well, I'm very concerned about it, as I know you are too, because Trump is clearly trying to rig the election. The Republicans are all in on it. They're changing the laws in state after state. They're purging people off the voting rolls in the red states right now. This is something that has been going on for quite some time. I mean, in the 2000 election, Jeb Bush purged 90,000 black people off the voting rolls in Florida so that his brother, George, could win by 537 votes. Literally, a vote purge in Florida gave the White House to the Republican Party, and the Democrats just never screamed about that loud enough. I mean, I'm just horrified to this day that the Democratic Party as a whole, and Al Gore in particular, didn't just raise absolute hell, because although we didn't learn about it for a few months, but Greg Palast broke this story for BBC, and the whole
Yeah.
world knew about it. It just no American media picked it up, which was astonishing.
Well, but is that really astonishing in that who they,
Yeah, that's kind of a whole nother conversation. But the bottom line is that they have a whole wide variety of ways to suppress the vote and to try to steal the election, including Republicans in the House and Senate simply refusing to seat elected Democrats, which they can do.
Yeah.
David French wrote about that 2 weeks ago for the New York Times, and it really shocked a lot of people. But that's something that the Republicans apparently are actually discussing. So I think that the only thing right now that will save our republic, and I realize this may sound bleak, but I'm optimistic, is massive voter turnout and overwhelming outraged public opinion.
Now, I think I think we're gonna be there by November.
I,
My biggest concern for November is what is ICE gonna do, because I honestly think there's a purpose for ICE and the gulags that they're building. And this is not conspiracy theory. I cannot see a valid reason for anything else. But that said, I think, and I think based on everything that I'm seeing being out there in the field, is that Democrats are intent on coming out and vote. My concern is that I still don't see the narrative coming out of rank and file national Democrats that that gives people the impetus to come out there and vote in the volumes that they should. I mean, this war, I don't see us taking advantage of the war. We just had a scare with foods, the cyclosporin in foods, etc. I don't see us taking advantage of the irresponsibility of the federal government. I mean, there is so much that I think is just left on the table. Sometimes you wonder if they're just lazy. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. The piece that I published today at
Hmm.
hartmannreport.com was suggesting that the that that the thing that allows big progressive changes to happen in America isn't just the calendar. I mean, these
Right.
things have happened every 80 years. I think you and I have discussed that before, from the American Revolution to the Civil War was 80
Hmm.
years, Civil War to World War II is 80 years, World War II to now is 81 years.
Hmm.
Um, and but there are things that don't happen inside that 80-year thing. For example, the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. How did he
Accordion.
get civil rights legislation passed? How did he
Right.
get voting rights passed? How did he get Medicare and Medicaid passed? And it turned out that what it was a crisis. The crisis, of course, was the assassination of Jack Kennedy, a very popular president,
Right.
and kind of the death of optimism, and then his brother, and then Martin Luther King, all within this brief period of time. And that crisis caused Americans to focus on, let's make things better. And I would argue that right now, we're at the end of an 80-year period.
Hmm.
And B, we are in a crisis. We're in a crisis of democracy. We're in a crisis of corruption, which is going to be the piece I'm going to publish tomorrow. I just finished writing it. The Democrats' principal message today's was Democrats should all be running on Medicare for all. I really believe that. I think big programs, I think the time is ripe for big programs, and people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. But tomorrow it's going to be Democrats should run on corruption. I think we can do both. By the way,
I agree with you 100%. And I've been pushing Medicare for all. I've had the Social Security Works, Lawson on, and all of these guys on. But let me tell you what's interesting. Something that was a shocker for me today, and this was from Bruce, one of our devoted listeners and supporters. I remember 4 years ago when he went on Social Security, he was paying $200 a month for the Medigap. And he said today, hey, Berto, well, my Medigap just came in and it's $1,000 a month now, plus the $200 that I'm paying for my regular Medicaid thing. And that's $1,200, Tom. And while Bruce can afford the $1,200, how many Americans do you know for health care for one person can afford $1,200 a month?
Yeah, no, it's a real serious problem, and I wrote a book about this, The Hidden History of America.
Yes, I remember.
And
I still use your book as a default on an article that I wrote that's every time I get it, because there are a lot of times our callers would be, I know nothing about Medicare. I don't know nothing about it. I wrote an article. I can't remember the name I had an article from the a video from the Social Security Works and another video. And then I put your book underneath as the ultimate source on the item. And anytime somebody asks about that, that is what I send them.
Yeah.
And, so.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And what I learned was that the 20% hole that has to be filled by private health insurance, the Medigap coverage, was there to discourage Black people from getting health services.
Yes.
It was just that simple. I mean, that was the price that the white Southern racists demanded of Lyndon Johnson to pass Medicare.
Right.
So we need to fix that. We just need to get that out of there. There's no reason for it. There's no reason for private health insurance to be in Medicare, number one. And that could be easily solved by simple majority legislation in Congress. And then number two, I've got a regular caller. His name is Ziggy, calls into the program all the time. And he just went through some fairly in-depth cancer treatment, surgery and radiation and chemo and everything else. And he's been only getting Medicare and not the Medigap insurance on the assumption that he can fill in that 20% hole himself and actually save money. And he's been successfully doing it. He has, I'm not recommending people do that. I'd never recommend anybody be uninsured, but it's got a lot of people scratching their heads.
My hunch is that a lot of the doctors are forgiving the 20%.
Yeah. Well, he said many of them will do that. He can shop around and sometimes find cheaper versions.
Right.
The hospitals will cut him deals when they know that, it's going to be partial cash payment. Yeah. It's just been basically talking to people and getting it,
Yeah.
Plus the 20% is not always, it's just not always that much money.
But the question is, I think the difference between that and, other insurance policies is that 20% has no upper limit. I think it's 20% all the way. Well, look, Tom, as far, I wanted to speak to you about your book. Number one, I wanted to speak to you about the election. Now I want to ask you, now that we're coming to the closing ends, tell me, what are your thoughts on America in general? I mean, and include with that our interrelation between NATO, Iran, China, and Central America and the Caribbean.
We were the first country in the history of the world, to the best of my knowledge, that was founded on an idea rather than on genetics. Now, granted, most of the people who participated in founding this country were white men, but the idea that they put forward was, and I mean, back then the idea of race, A, was kind of fluid, and B, included things like Italians were not white people.
Yeah.
So that had the potential, and I think has been largely fulfilled in some ways anyway, to be a beacon for the whole world. To say, this is what freedom really is. This is what democracy can be. This is a form of government that we all should work toward. And in my book, The Hidden History of American Democracy, I talk about how democracy is something you find in virtually every nook and cranny of the animal kingdom. Particularly mammals, the democratic decision making. But it's true of fish, it's true of birds, it's true of mammals, it's true of ants, it's true of, it's just amazing. Democracy works because democracy is the very best survival skill. Democracies are the most resilient. The wisdom of the crowd is actually a real thing. And what we're doing right now is sacrificing that, on the altar of turning America into Russia. Donald Trump getting his, every 2 weeks since he was inaugurated, he's had an hour and a half or 2 hour phone call with Vladimir Putin. And I'm convinced that Putin is just walking him through step by step, all the way to turning America into Russia. And I think that we've reached the point where Americans are starting to figure that out, and they're ready to push back. And that's what we're going to see in November. We'll find out if we succeed in taking the House and Senate. Then I have a lot of optimism about the future of this country, and I think that the end of the whole conservative cycle is going to be dead, and we will be setting up a progressive cycle, hopefully. On the other hand, if they, by hook or by crook, hang on to the House and Senate going into next year, I'm very pessimistic. I'm very concerned about the future of this country. So we got a big job ahead of us, Egberto.
Well, let me just tell you something, Thom. As far as this movement on the progressive side to get the message out, you're at the top. You're at the forefront. And when people talk about, are we going to get it done? And I mean this from the depths of my heart. It's going to take a lot of the knowledge that you have, a lot of the knowledge that you put in the minds of so many people, that you enlighten so many people. That is what it's going to take. You are doing a hell of a job in all that you do, in the books that you write. And by the way, can you show me that book? I want people to make sure and get that book.
The new one?
The new one. Folks, don't forget, go out and get Who Killed the American Dream, the greatest political crime ever told. You as the leader in the independent progressive market is essential. And most of us, and I speak to all of us around, we always use you as our template for getting the message out however we can. We don't have your knowledge base, because damn it, guy, I don't know how the hell you write and have written so much and read so much. But again, you're the template. So one of the things I want to tell you is thank you for all that you do with the Thom Hartmann show, with the Thom Hartmann books, with the Thom Hartmann newsletters, and everything else. You are one of our templates that we have to multiply over and over again. So with that, I want to thank you so kindly for appearing once again on, in this case, Egberto Off the Record and Under Politics Done Right. Thank you so kindly for being with me at this time.
Well, thank you, Egberto, and you're doing a hell of a great job yourself. So keep it up.
Have a good one, my brother. Peace.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. Love that guy. As I told him, he is, in fact, the template. All of us that are doing progressive media right now. I remember back in DC, he used to operate out of a large studio. I remember those days in DC, and he had a big staff and all of that then. He has since, with all the new technology, he hadn't had to have all of that he had before. But he had a big staff and a big. I think he had something like a quarter of the floor in the place that we went and visited. And all when we did our rallies in D.C., he was during the snowstorm that we had with the coffee party. He was there. When we had Occupy Wall Street, I think we visited New York one time. He was there. You know what I mean? So he has always been there for the progressive movement. Anyway, And was it? Yeah, I think it was Occupy Wall Street in New York. Yeah, that's what it was. What you call it? Park. Anyway, yeah. Anyhow, folks, did I have another video? I did, but I don't have the time to play it given where we're at right now. But anyway, yeah, Tom is a very nice man. I call him a lot. He's very, very good. Yulin Hudson says, I have been listening to Thom Hartmann for about 25 years. I think all of us have. And that's what I said. He has always been our template. Those in the progressive media, he has been the template. All right, LBW. Look, I read you, girl, with the insurance, etc. It is ridiculous what's happening when you know when Bruce said. I don't know if you guys remember. 2 days ago, Bruce called into the show, and he told us about what his Medigap was going up to, and all I could think about is that is how they're going to try to force everybody to go on to Medicare Advantage. And the problem is the following: Bruce has a few illnesses that he has to take care of, and so he has the absolute best Medigap Pro product that they have. But the thing is, a lot of people need what he has, and eventually they just won't have it. They'll have to go to Medicare Advantage and just take whatever Medicare Advantage says. You can have this, but you can't have that. We have got to. We have got to, folks, get Medicare for all. El Sayed has got to win. We have got to have a mouthpiece that is sufficiently articulate, that's operating out of Washington, that isn't Bernie Sanders, a younger version of Bernie Sanders that has a new following, that can really make the case, not just morally, but mathematically, that there is absolutely no other solution for paying for healthcare than single payer. And then we also need to change our healthcare system so that doctors don't have to spend or go into $300,000 or $400,000 debt to get their degrees. And we have got to make sure that nurses are well supported in the field, that PAs, physicians assistants, all we have to revamp this whole system. When you hear me speak about what capitalism has done to healthcare, it has screwed the doctors, it has screwed the nurses, it has screwed the PAs, everybody. And for those who constantly want to make excuses for a system that does what it is doing and claim that, well, we can solve the problem by regulations. This cannot be regulated. Regulations assume people can have a choice. When you break your leg, you don't have a choice. You just take whatever the market will bear. And we have to speak about more of this in detail. We have to be more assertive. We have to be more intentional. All of you that are having issues with your health insurance, you have got to engage. When LBW says my insurance went up by $150, her family, over the period of 1 year in just health insurance, is going to have to put out an extra $150 a month, but at the same time have an $8,700 deductible, which probably means you ain't got insurance unless you spend more than $10,000 out of your pocket. That is saying that you are worth the first $10,000 that you are working for goes to some insurance company, some capitalist that is profiting from it, folks. We have to stop suffering in silence. We have got to stop suffering in silence. I earlier I played a piece, a TikTok for our morning program. I'll probably play it for you tomorrow, where we talk about the problem with the MAGA mind, the Mike Cisak that is talking ridiculosities in the chat right now. We've spoken about these issues. We won't reach him, but we'll reach enough so that we can actually get real healthcare that the rest of the world has realized it's from. It is so important. It is so important. Who do I have the honor of speaking with?
Hey, good afternoon. This is Bobby.
Hey, Bobby, talk to me.
I have two questions. First off, um, when he was talking about I think he said when a corporation became a person, is he
Hmm.
talking about like this gives them loopholes for it's two-part question too. The first one, and I'll let you answer them. Is it? I guess that's where corporations can like claim bankruptcy, like an individual could, and just be relieved of all
Yes,
debt and just create a new name.
yes,
That's right. And then
yes.
I thought the other one that really shocked me that he said though was did he say something about people winning seats and then not being allowed to sit? Is there some kind of mechanism that allows like people to like refuse, like even if you won a seat in Congress or something, to not allow you to
Well,
take your
yeah.
spot? Like what?
Once you get elected, you have to be seated in Congress, and the Congress, you get. There's an official, on I think it's January 3rd when you get seated, and the current Speaker of the House can simply not seat you before the turnover occurs. I mean,
Uh,
it will be a constitutional war, but again, because of the way the transition occurs, if you read the Constitution, how the transition occurs between Congresses, they can decide to seat you and not seat the other one, etc. And it's something that we have to be. All these things are things that we have to be ready for because the cheat is on. Now, when it goes back, let me handle the corporation first. Corporations have benefits. Corporations are superhuman beings. Okay, the way the Supreme Court ruled. In other words, corporations get unlimited spending power. You as a human being don't. Corporations can claim bankruptcy, and even if they do wrong, you can't throw them in jail. You can be thrown in jail. The ridiculousness of making corporations people is crazy. I, as a member of Move to Amend, when I was on the board of Move to Amend, we wrote a constitutional amendment, the 28th Amendment, and it just had two lines. The first line was corporations are not people, and the second line was money is not speech. Okay, because the way the Supreme Court has gotten around to allow unlimited spending by corporations, as well as the ability for corporations to to die and to go to, again to be treated guilty while the operators are not, is by pointing out that hey, if we define money as speech, then since we cannot control speech, we cannot control money for the corporation. Now, ironically, we can put limits on what a person can give as an individual to a campaign. It is, look, when I talk about David Cobb teaching me a few years ago that the Constitution was a capital document, that is exactly what I mean. And it upsets a lot of people when we hit on the Constitution or we hit on some of the genesis of the country, but we're living through what we created or what those guys created. And that the fight, when you if you watch Legalized Democracy again, you'll see how we went from a country that was really never democratic and constantly made it a bit more democratic. People don't like to hear it, but it's a reality of who we are and where we've been and where we need to go. Anything else?
oh no, that was a great interview. That was really shocking that they pretty much built a law around a footnote that a clerk put on the margin, but that's
Yeah.
really interesting. But anyway, have a
Thank
good
you,
day.
brother.
Thanks.
YouTube. All right, folks, we are at about 2 minutes out for closure. I want to thank you all for coming to the program. Cheryl, I need to call out. Don't forget, folks, please sign up for the book club. We want to start building a good uh, inclusive and engaging is the word I want to use. Engaging environment with our PDR posse. So please go to tinyurl.com/PDR book club and let's give a big shout out and a hand to Cheryl, who has devoted herself to our book club, our monthly Coffee with Egberto meetings. I can't thank her enough. Please go ahead and sign up at tinyurl.com/PDR Book Club. Maywood says, "Hey, Egberto, I'm going to be interviewed on exactly that." Hey, get somebody, when you're getting interviewed, get somebody to get a cell phone and tape you as well, so that we can take snippets and let our, you're a PDR posse member. We'll go ahead and make sure that our PDR posse do it. Cotter, that is all Cheryl's doing. Cheryl tells me what to do as far as when we have those meetings, and I say, yes, ma'am. So Cheryl will tell you sometime soon. Anyway, but what else have we got here? Let me see what else have we got here. What else have we got here? Anyway, 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 we got to close this baby down. Please remember, we need your support. Go ahead and click on that subscribe button if you are on Substack. And please consider, if you have the wherewithal to do so, please become a paid subscriber. Again, I know things are hard for a lot of folks, but if you have the ability to do so, please help us be able, like Thom and I. Thom and I were in the same business. He's 10 times as large as I am. We are trying like hell to do our part. We have dissecting audiences, which is important for us to spread this message. So if you have the wherewithal, please hit that subscribe button and become a paid subscriber if you can. Likewise, if you're on another platform, please consider going to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Hey, Agolf Twitler, how you doing? Thank you for being here. People defend trickle down economics because they expect to win the lottery, and they won't. Most people won't. Most people won't. Robert Davenport, the exact history of corporate charters show that original corporations were only chartered for, I think it was 20 years. You say 30 years. I thought it was 20 years, but I could be wrong. Anyway, but good point. Let's see. Egberto, is your GoFundMe for equipment still live or stale? I don't know if my equipment is but I don't want to do anything on the equipment GoFundMe yet, because I'm going to have to revamp this the major computer, and I haven't, I've been researching what panels and computer to get for processing. Because let me give you guys a little secret. I'm going to go over by a minute. Thank you for asking that, though. Hey, Robert, thank you for the super chat. Let me tell you what's going on with this equipment. Right now, our software for processing videos has gone ahead of the hardware that we have. So we have these constant crashes when developing the when processing all these videos. So I'm looking for the appropriate hardware, and when I put that all packaged together, I'm going to put out the GoFundMe for the new equipment. But I don't want to do that before I do all my research, because again, like you guys did 5 years ago, I come and I show you exactly where everything is. Anyway, folks, I got to get out of here. Love you all to death. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this baby. I am what?